Welcome back. Nothing about building a family is easy, but if you are one of the hundreds of thousands of Americans who choose adoption as your path to parenthood, you know it's also involving a lot of paperwork, the process, the patience especially that a lot of families have to wait for. Luckily, though, Sue, there is a podcast for that.
There is indeed. Nicole Witt is the host of Adopting the Podcast, and she leads her listeners through all the topics to consider when deciding if adoption is right for you. You got your home studies, your finances, and getting your friends and families on board. Nicole, join me for Listen to This. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us. Obviously, adoption, always a conversation worth having, certainly in the news a lot right now. And your podcast has been around for a little bit, talking about when people should start thinking about adopting, how they should look at themselves, and then steps to get to the process. Talk about your first episode and what some of the things were that you covered in it.
Yeah, so the intended audience for my podcast is for people who are very early in the process, just starting to think about adoption or really just getting started. So the very first episode was about how to sort of know if you're prepared to get started and how to make that emotional and mental shift from maybe doing infertility treatments to adoption, which is really important to kind of separate those and look at adoption as the beginning of a new and exciting journey, not a continuation of, oh, we've tried all these things that just haven't worked yet. Let's just keep slogging through, right? So it really takes a different, more positive mindset to have a good experience with it.
I'm an adoptive parent myself, and when our process started, I remember the best advice I got from one of the professionals we were working with is that if you want to be a parent in some way, you will be a parent. You don't know what the path is of how you're going to get there, but you can parent almost anybody in any way. One of your episodes, you talk about the misconceptions about adoption that some people feel are barriers to keep them from actually pursuing the idea of adoption. Can you talk about some of those?
Yeah, I mean, there are unfortunately many, many myths and misconceptions about adoption, but I think some of the key ones are that people think that it just takes years and years and years to adopt, and it really doesn't need to. There are ways that you can approach the process to make it take much less time than that. I think, another big fear is that the birth parents can come back at any time and just reclaim the child. If you're doing an ethical, proper, legal adoption, once all the legal steps have been properly taken, that can't happen, right? And then probably the third biggest one is that people think that all of these babies are exposed to, hardcore drug use. They're all going to have long-term issues associated with that and so on. And that's just not the reality of it. I mean, is there some drug exposure? Sometimes, yes, absolutely. But generally speaking, these babies are equally healthy to all other babies born in the U.S.
One of my favorite questions I got, and I still get it, was how much did it cost and how did you afford it? Which I would usually ask if someone had biological children. Well, how much did it cost for you to deliver your children? You just didn't see the bill because you may have insurance. But, there are also obstacles that people think being able to afford it is one of them. But, having been on antidepressants or actually having a chronic disease, people sort of self-select themselves out of the pool because they think that that's going to disqualify them. But that's not always the case.
Definitely not. And things in terms of, seeking therapy or being on antidepressants, I mean, it's very common. And I get that question a lot too. Is that going to keep me from adopting? And it definitely won't. In fact, that tends to be viewed positively in terms of, look, you had a problem and you took the appropriate steps to address it, right? That's a good thing. And that means that in theory, if the child has any issues in the future, you're not just going to sweep them under the rug. You're going to take active steps to get them any help that they need. So that's not a barrier. The finances, they can be. It is unfortunately a very expensive process. Not very many people have the money just sitting in the bank that it takes, but there are definitely ways to approach it. There are loans, there are grants, there are fundraising ideas. There are all kinds of different things. One of the best tips, at least to start, that I've heard is start living immediately like you have that baby. right? Put the money aside that you would be putting into daycare, diapers, food, all of that. And that money's going to add up really quickly. And if you put that towards your adoption, that's going to go a long way. And one other thing, there is also more than $14,000 tax credit for people who qualify, which is not a deduction. It's a dollar for dollar tax credit, which can put more than $14,000 back in their pocket. So that obviously makes a huge difference for a lot of people.
So if someone is thinking about becoming an adoptive parent, this is the month to do it if you've got plans to look forward to being a parent, hopefully in 2023, right?
It's really a great time to start. A lot of people are like, oh, it's summer, I just don't want to do anything serious. But it's a great time to start because expectant moms, potential birth moms are people just like the rest of us. And when the holidays come in December, they tend to put things off until after the holidays too, especially things that are going to be difficult for them, right? It's not happy for them to be signing up with an adoption agency and choosing the adoptive parents for their child. So there is often a bit of a bump in activity into January, late January, maybe early February, once the holidays have passed and those expectant moms are signing up with agencies. So all the potential adoptive parents who say, oh, I'm going to deal with all that in January, miss those opportunities, which could be a good fit for them. But if you start now, then you're ready to go fresh in the new year. And maybe you find a match pretty quickly, when the expectant moms are getting signed up with the agencies.
All right, Nicole Witt, we thanks so much for you joining us. We look forward to listening to more in the series. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much for having me, Sue.
You can find Adopting the Podcast wherever podcasts are found. Hey, you want me to talk to your favorite podcaster on Listen to This? You can @ me on Twitter @SueNBC Boston. We'll be right back.